Welcome to the JB Media Digital Drop-In, the first one of 2021. We're so happy to see everyone, and thanks again for your patience while we dealt with some technical difficulties. Today, we're going to be talking about Make Content Marketing Magic in 2021. And this topic got me really excited because I don't know about all of you, but for me, as we went into the second quarter of 2020 and then continued through what seemed like a lot of unexpected issues, I got a little bit off my game this past year. So my schedule got out of whack. There was lots of unexpected things that took my attention away from plans I had made for last year when it came to creating content and publishing content. So I'm excited to share some ideas about how to move forward this year and be really, really focused. And I'm going to give you, in my part of the presentation, some really clear action steps to take, which I'm excited about. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sarah Benoit. I'm co-founder and lead instructor of the JB Media Institute. And I also own a web design company here in Asheville called Creative Original. So again, a lot of what I've done over the course of my career is really focus in on content creation and distribution and really figuring out how to connect with people through that content, whether it's social media, SEO, the content that's on your website, the blogs that you're creating, the videos that you're creating. All of those things have become part of this kind of holistic view that I'm taking when it comes to really creating valuable information online that people need. So the first thing that I want to talk about is setting the stage for 2021. And I think for me, a big part of how we set that stage is to really dig into our own passions, our own purpose, our own excitement, and to really harness that for the new year. So when it comes to topics, even though we're going to talk about some other strategic things, I do feel like you really want to ask yourself these questions. What makes you feel excited and motivated? What's going to highlight the real strengths that you have, the real expertise and talent? How are you going to attract people that align with your values as a brand or a business? How are you going to be fresh and innovative and creative in a way that people haven't seen before so that you can stand out from everything else in the market? So think about those things, especially as you're starting to put your plan together for the new year. Really ask yourself these questions, because even though we're going to talk about some strategy that's data-driven, I also think we have to get excited, right? To stick to a content marketing schedule, we have to be excited to put that content together and to create it. So once you've kind of got some focus around what's really motivating you this year, or what's motivating your team if you're a bigger group, then the next thing I want you to do is then take some time to dig into some data as you start the new year. And hopefully most of you have the Google Search Console and Google Analytics set up. Essentially, what you want to do is really use those tools to help you identify what topics you're already succeeding with and what topics maybe are newer areas that you want to open up. So I always want to prioritize just a few things that I find in the Google Search Console and Google Analytics. I want to look for topics that we're already ranking for on the lower half of page 1. So that's positions 5 through 10. If we're lower down on page 1, I really want to think about what topics could we potentially get to the top of page 1 for. I also want to look at those topics that we rank from pages 2 to 5, right? So that's positions 11 to 50, because I feel like those are opportunities to move higher in the Google rankings if we can, through various optimization tactics. And so we really want to look at those search phrases, those topics. And then we want to go into our Google Analytics and really look at whether or not certain pages, which are usually associated with different topics, are succeeding better, especially on Google search engine. So I do think you can take this and expand it into looking at social media as well, really looking at your social media stats and seeing which content topics got the most attention there. But I think the first place you can go, especially at the beginning of the year, is to really look at this website data and figure out how you can be developing content for your website that's really going to work. So I've put together a little kind of map for you about this. For those of you who have the Search Console, and for those of you who have Google Analytics, this is just a map for how you can locate this data. And I've given you a little bit of an example with some other projects that I'm working on to show you how I've kind of utilized this same tactic to generate ideas. So this is the Google Search Console. You can see over here, I'm in performance. And then I'm looking at the queries or the keyword phrases, the topics that our website is already ranking for. So with this particular example, I'm working with a client who has a website that deals with retirement. And you can see one of the things that we were able to quickly identify is that we need to be talking about things related to 55 plus communities. That's a specific way of searching for topics related to retirement in the region. You can see there's certainly phrases that have to do with Asheville specifically that we can dig into, or even the North Carolina mountains. And here you can see the Search Console is showing me the placement, right? So this is how I can know, is it on page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Here I'm lower on page 1, lower down on page 1, page 3, things like that, page 2. So essentially, I start to see trends in these topics and pull ideas from here. So you can see some other things that we found. We needed to be writing about things related to senior living, right? That's another phrase that we can build off of. We are doing, fairly well on these phrases, usually right now between page 2 and maybe page 6 on Google. And so those are, again, opportunities for us to talk about those particular types of topics. And then you can see here, this just showed us when we first looked under performance that we were getting a lot of attention from search engines about the different retirement communities that we talk about. So this allowed us to really look at the different communities that we represent on the website and really see which ones have brand recognition that we can build off of to drive traffic. So again, I used this type of data to create a content plan to talk more about senior living, about 55 plus, and to highlight the top 10 to 20 communities that we should be maybe talking about more frequently that will drive additional search engine traffic. Again, if you're in Google Analytics, you can go into acquisition, all traffic and channels, and then you'll see this option for organic search. When you click on that option, it's going to take you into an area where you can click up here on landing page, and you can see the pages of your website that are getting the most traffic from Google, Yahoo, Bing, but especially Google, obviously, since they dominate the market. So this allows us to see which pages of the website are performing best on the Google search engine especially. And so you can see here, there's different blog posts for this client that are more getting more attention from the search engines, getting more traffic, getting more people staying on the page. And so essentially we can look at these topics and build off of that in our content plan, right? So this is a group that works in the area of nutrition. And so this allows us to really see that immediately there were topics in their blog that people were attaching to more frequently, especially through the search engines. So how can we include in our content plan for this year to go forward with topics related to those same things? And then finally, I think one of the biggest things you'll want to do is think about how you can clean out your email inbox and have more systems for tracking trending topics online. So these are just a few of some of my favorite tools. Many of you I've mentioned Google Trends and Google Alerts before, but I'm also now using a new tool called Feedly, which I really enjoy. I've started to use TubeBuddy more. That's where I can really research YouTube video keyword kind of content ideas. This is where I can track a number of sources with an AI. So I can put in my favorite sources for information and I can pay a small monthly fee to use their artificial intelligence so that instead of getting everyone's newsletters and combing through them, which is how I've been doing things, going into the new year, I can use Feedly to kind of more deliver specific topics to me as I need them. So if if I know that we're going to cover a certain content topic in February, March, April, May, June, then I can really use Feedly to track those topics, and I can pull different expert information and incorporate it into the blogs I'm writing, social media posts that I'm doing, and so forth. And then I've actually started to use Reddit and Quora more just as a listening tool. So when I have time, I am spending some time digging into questions people ask on both of these websites. Quora, especially, I really enjoy because if I want, I can answer as an expert and give people information, but it really allows me to understand what people need when it comes to content. And it allows me to really think about the people on the other end of the line as I'm developing a content schedule for the rest of the year. So, action step. Outline content ideas for the first month of this year, whether that's January, February, or for the whole first quarter. Really sit down, use your passion, look at some data, and do some listening. Take a little bit of time to surf through some different areas where people are talking about things related to your products and services. And don't be afraid to come up with what I call content buckets or categories that include a lot of different subcategory ideas. The next thing is creating your magician's toolbox. So this is something we've talked about a lot in the past, but it's something that I think is just really valuable to revisit as you go into the new year. So what channels are you really using to market, to promote, to engage with people? Really, what does this look like? Outline it, right? Really break it down into the different tools that you have inside your toolbox. So maybe it's your website, your blog, your e-newsletter, your Facebook, your Instagram, your TikTok. Maybe you've got advertising campaigns that you want to do. Maybe you're even doing some other types of more traditional marketing, and you're doing public relations and other things like that. How can you really outline all of these channels and really think about where you want to spend your time, right? So especially looking back, are there things that you didn't really get to last year or that you weren't really excited about? How can we maybe table those and really focus our energy on the channels that are working? And if there's new channels that you want to employ going forward, we have to be really realistic about whether or not you have the time, the resources, the bandwidth, the manpower to actually add those new channels, and do you have the time to learn them? So really think about that. Be realistic about it. And then know yourself. So once you've got your channels in place, really what types of content can you create that leverage your talent and skills, especially if you're a small business or a one-man marketing team, right? How can you use your skills to the best of your abilities and really have an impact? So really think about the channels and then the mediums you're going to use within those channels, whether it's graphics, whether it's videos, whether it's long form or short form content, whether it's written content. Really think this out. Take some time, especially as we're in January, to evaluate this again. And like I said, take that realistic lens and knowing what you're really good at, and really think about answering these questions. What kind of content do you have time for? Do you have the ability to put it into your weekly workflow? Are there new things that you want to give attention to or that you want to explore? And are there things that you want to let go of that just haven't worked? Asking yourself these questions is going to help you put together a content plan that, again, helps hopefully take what you did last year and elevate it up to another level. So that's the next action step. What's in your toolbox, right? What's being removed? What's being added? And create a document that outlines this. And again, for those of you that have a team of people, maybe you've got 2 or 3 people on a marketing team, maybe you're running a department or something like that, then make sure that you really put together this information as a team, right? Sit down and talk it out. If people have been handling different tools, get their thoughts about how things went last year if you didn't already do that in December. So really take some time to just outline this in a real tangible way, right? And if you don't want to put it in a Word document, draw it out on a piece of paper, take a picture and share it with everyone. And then the last piece of the puzzle to me to really make the magic happen is you have to commit to regularly scheduled programming when it comes to the content you're creating. And this is the hurdle I'm trying to jump over right now, because I feel like I lost that ability to keep my regularly scheduled programming going last year. There's so many different things that happened and changed that I didn't expect. And it threw me a little bit out of my scheduling. So I'm really rethinking my schedule this year. I'm really trying to put together a clear trajectory that I've launched this week. And hopefully I can stick to it as we go forward. And again, if you have a team, now's a great time to bring everybody together to think about this. How are you going to have the time that you need to do all the steps that are required, right? And so you can see some of these in the bullet points here. Making graphics, writing content, recording or editing videos, answering comments and messages, scheduling or posting content, and engaging with your partners. All of these things have to be worked into your schedule. If you're doing your own marketing, or if you're a small marketing department, we've got to figure out how this all gets into a workflow. So I'm really taking something I learned from Lisa Zahia here in town, who I'm a big fan of, when I took some of her programs, where I really have started to map out my days so that I know when I'm going to be creating content versus distributing content versus creating graphics versus writing, right? I'm really scheduling these things out so I can really become aware of how much time they take to accomplish. And especially if I'm going to delegate, which I hope to be doing, I'm hoping that we'll revisit some internships this year and I can delegate some things. If I'm able to do this now, I'll be in a position to really delegate down the road and really know what I'm asking people to work into their workflow as we move forward. And then I saw the question that you asked, Stephanie, about, is there a scheduling tool that you recommend? It really depends on what tools we're talking about, right? So that's why you got to create your toolbox first and really understand the type of content that you want to create, the mediums you want to use, because those are all going to dictate which scheduling tool you choose. And you might have to use multiple depending on what you're doing. So if I'm writing blogs on WordPress, I can schedule those blogs. I might also want a scheduler for social media. That depends on which channels I'm using, and it depends on what I want to schedule. So for instance, later.com, if I want to schedule Instagram posts for free, I can use it. But if I want to schedule Instagram stories, I have to upgrade that tool. So there's so many great tools out there. And I can see Amber's talking about Asana. And Asana is a great project management tool where you can do all sorts of things. And I think Basecamp is another one that's really great. I've used Zoho a bunch. If we're talking about social media, I'm a big fan of Later, of Schedugram, of Hootsuite, Buffer, Sprout Social. Those are some of my favorites. So, a lot of website and blog stuff, you have the ability to schedule content to post at different times. But yeah, those are kind of just an overview of things that I'm really a big fan of. Also, I want to encourage everyone, this is an idea I've talked about in the past, but I wanted to bring it back as a reminder. I was at an event and listened to an amazing vice president from LinkedIn talk about content marketing, and he really broke down this idea of using longer content to drive shorter content. So when you spend time creating a longer blog post, an infographic, an ebook, a longer video, all of these things are sort of long form pieces that you can then parse out into smaller ideas. And so the LinkedIn speaker I heard talked about thinking of it like a turkey at Thanksgiving, and how you have the whole turkey, which is the long form content, but you can take pieces of that content and break it out and serve it up. And essentially, I've always just used that kind of analogy to think about how, if we've got longer pieces of content that take more time to create, how can we then, as we're creating those, create little teasers and little smaller pieces of content that can eventually drive people to the longer piece? So, that's just something I think we should all be thinking about when we're creating our plans, is how can we do that? right? So how can we say we're going to write an ebook on this topic? It's going to take 2 months, but we can be teasing out that topic on social media and in our e-newsletters and creating different graphics and things like that that will, lead up to the launch of that ebook. We really want to be thinking about those arcs, because that's really what content campaigning is about, right? Is putting together those ideas. And then we really want to figure out a way this year, I feel in 2021, to combine planning with creativity and innovation. So I keep saying that I feel like going into 2021, one of the things I learned this year is that now's a great time to let yourself be a little crazy, be a little wild. If there's something you've never tried before, consider trying it. If there's something that you've resisted because it felt like, too much of a stretch, jump into that challenge from a content perspective and really see if you can stretch the boundaries and play with new ideas. The great thing about especially social media, but digital in general, is that we can test things. We can have some fun. We can experiment so that we can figure some new possibilities or opportunities out. So keep that in mind. Many of you who've attended our webinars before have heard me talk about rapid prototyping, which is an engineering approach where instead of spending all their money and time on one prototype, they think about how they can make 30 or 50 different prototypes. And what they're able to do through that process is really discover the problems or issues in their designs, and they figure it out more quickly, and they don't spend their entire budget on one idea that maybe then doesn't work out at the end, right? So with content, I feel like we want to take that same approach. We want to be able to create many, many different versions of things, especially if you're doing advertising this year. I would encourage you, create multiple ad sets with multiple ads and see what happens, right? Because I think the world has changed, and we need to really start to understand how those changes are impacting our audiences. And so again, we want to be planning, we want to have a schedule, we want to be really grounded and focused in order to achieve our goals, but we want to have some more, I think, drive towards experimentation and fun and seeing what happens and figuring out how we can push the boundaries a little and maybe step outside of what's comfortable. So again, action step for this. What days and times of the week are going to be dedicated to content creation and distribution? And when you're creating your content calendar, really think specifically about the tasks and deadlines. And again, as I said, I had some ideas for tools that you could use, but find a task management scheduling tool that really makes sense for you. For some people, it's paper calendars can be it. It's really okay if it's something that simple. Eventually, of course, you just want to make sure you can delegate tasks easily. That's where having stuff in project management systems and scheduling tools that are pieces of software, it's really going to make it easier to kind of work with a team to delegate things over time. But really in the beginning, figure out for this year, how can you set up a system for yourself that makes it easier? So I'm going to turn the controls over to Justin so he can share his information. You will all get copies of the recording and the slide decks. You can click on these links to explore more. But I'm going to just stop the share really quickly. And I was watching the chat. If there's any questions, please feel free to let me know. I know some of you were saying you love Asana. So do I. If you'd like to, you can also put questions in the Q&A and we'll be monitoring those as well. I did see a hand up. So if there is a question, like I said, feel free to jump in somewhere, drop it in, and we'll make sure that we address it. But Justin, take it away.
All right, thanks, Sarah. Thank you, everybody. I'm glad we have a great turnout despite the technical issues we had this afternoon getting this going. Really excited to share my slides that are, I think, a good complement to what Sarah has been talking about in her half of the presentation. So let me bring up my slides now. All right, so for those of you who don't know me, I am Justin Bellamy. I'm the founder of JB Media Group, which got started officially in April of 2011. So we're coming up on our 10-year anniversary of opening the office and past the 10-year anniversary of my sort of formation of the business, October of 2010. And Sarah was part of that original team that joined the company in April of 2011. A couple years later, we co-founded JB Media Institute, of which this training is part of our content and curriculum. And 2 years ago, I led the acquisition of Romantic Asheville, which some of you may know really well, others might not know about it at all. It is a regional travel and tourism visitor's guide for our area of Western North Carolina. It covers about a 100-mile radius around Asheville, and it received 6.2 million visits last year, up about, I guess about 3 or 4% over the previous year, despite the challenges we saw in the tourism industry last year, which we were really proud of. The business is doing well, and I sort of work on all 3 businesses every week. So I added about 4 or 5 additional sections to what Sarah had put together. And the first one is about efficiency. This is something we've taught entire classes on, entire free webinars on as well. So I wanted to add this because it's something we talked about early last year, and I think everything we shared is still relevant. I wanted to boil it down to help align with what Sarah's recommending. So what I want to focus on is one specific strategy for efficiency, and it is a strategy for overcoming writer's block. For really busy people, writer's block can be really crippling. If you spend a lot of time looking at a blank page when you have things piling up, you're going to really get resistant to writing. It can also affect people whose full-time job is writing. We see it with our writers all the time. So one thing that we've identified as a way to overcome that is to take the work away from the written word medium to get the content onto the page. It's a lot easier to tweak and edit a piece of content than it is to write from blank. Regardless of how you do it, it's a good idea to have an outline. So you do have to write something. You usually can't start with just a recording of a video or audio because it's hard to know what you're going to talk about and give yourself the structure. So the outline's the first step. One way you can do it is to create the outline as an interview, and then you can answer those questions yourself. Or you can, if you have a team, you could be creating these interviews for other team members and interviewing them. But you would record the interview. If you want to use it as a video, you could actually record it as a video. That might make you feel a little more intimidated and slow down the process. If you can just do it really informally, either video or an audio recording on your phone or your computer. And then when you got that, you can transcribe it. And we recommend using a third-party transcription service. It does cost a little bit of money, but it will make it so that there's not another thing you have to put on your to-do list or delegate. You can just send it to a service, and there's plenty of services that will turn it around in one day. So it doesn't create any lag in the process. And then once you have the recording, you would edit it for whatever content format you are trying to do, where you can turn it into multiple posts, you can make one long form piece, lots of things like different types of content you might want to create. And if the video or audio is good enough, it's wise to use it, and often use it on the same piece of content, so you can embed it with the audio player or video player in the page. And what that'll do is it'll allow people who prefer auditory to engage, and it'll create a much greater time on page for people who sit there and listen to it, even if it's in the background while they're doing something else. It'll register that they've been on the page for a longer period of time, which is an indicator to Google that the content is really good, and that will help you improve your rankings. So my action step for this recommendation is to try out video or audio first as an approach for one of your content pieces in the first quarter of 2021. There shouldn't be anything too intimidating about this. Most people find it easier to talk about things. Some people find it easier if there's someone else interviewing them versus trying to do it by themselves. I personally am a little more comfortable when someone's asking me questions. I have them ahead of time. I have a little bit of time to prepare, and I'm just answering them off the cuff or with light notes. And that creates usually a good recording, and that can turn into a really good base draft for a piece of content. I'm currently writing a really long ebook that uses this approach to get started. So roles and workflow. This is more or less for organizations that have more than one person, or you're thinking about what you might need to outsource and what's kind of your strengths and weaknesses are. So if you're putting together a team, whether that's internally or a combination of internal and external to your company, here are the different separate tasks related to content marketing, content development. First is research and strategy. And the numbers I put in parentheses are the ones can be grouped together, the twos can be grouped together, the threes can be grouped together, meaning that there's skills that take a similar skill set and the same person can do them, but they might come up in different order in the actual process. So research and strategy is the first phase, the first part, then the writing, which can include the outlines, the summaries, and editing the transcription or doing the actual writing. Then there's editing and polishing the content, which is a copywriting task. It can be done by the writing person. And then there's the optimization, SEO, which content writers can be trained and can learn to do that, but often it's a skill that's refined and gotten really strong by the same person doing the research. And then there's graphic design and web backend, which is basically publishing. And that is often done by the same person. In a lot of organizations, in our organization, it's always been done by the same person. We actually have 2 people now on the team who are good at that combined skill set. And then there's distribution. This is more of the marketing coordination. And that's email marketing, social media, other types of ways to get the content out beyond just organic search results. And that can be done by a good generalist who does website work and design, but it can also be its own role. And if you're doing this all by yourself, like the next slide is going to say, it can be hard to do it all yourself. So you want to look at your strengths and weaknesses. I think that's actually the next slide. This slide hits on the phases and the timing. So honestly, I tried to pick kind of rough estimates here to give you guys an idea. But research and planning can take anywhere between 1 week and 2 months. It will be 1 week if you already know exactly what kind of topic you want to write about and you've already picked the topic like you did using some of the quick tips that Sarah shared. If you already know what topic it's going to be, you don't have to do a comprehensive topic prioritization and like a deep dive into keyword research. You can just do the research around the one topic, prioritize your subtopics, and that leads to your outline. But if you're trying to create a plan for the year, that can take a month or 2 of work, especially if you have multiple stakeholders who want to help prioritize the topics or review the research. The research itself can take up to 20 or 30 hours, and that can spread out over a few weeks. And then there's usually some rounds of review and revisions, prioritization, and then depending on how complex it is, you can write up a really thorough written plan, or you can just sort of summarize it. Then there's a development, and I think this depends on the length of the content piece, the amount of research, the amount of sources you need. And it's all internal knowledge, and it's not super long. You should be able to crank out an outline in a couple hours, record it in a couple hours the next day, get the transcript and edit it within a few days. That's a week turnaround. But if it's more involved, you have to do research, you have to do multiple source interviews, it can take longer. Publishing typically doesn't take more than a day or 2. The graphic design for most pieces of the content take a couple hours, and then getting online takes at most a couple of hours, and sometimes a lot less, and so that shouldn't take very long. And then promotion, it can be recurring, it can be ongoing, or it can just be you have a plan for every piece of content. It gets out on social, it goes in your next email, and that can happen over the next week or next month after it's published. You can then come back later if you want and reshare things or bundle things together in different ways for future promotions. So the action step here, identify your roles, identify your ideal timeline, and then if you are a one-person show, identify your weaknesses and ask for help, fill in gaps, get an intern, crowd out a small retainer with an expert to help you with the things you're not going to be good at, which might slow you down if you want to get out of the gate really well this year. So next is user-generated content. So user-generated content is when you activate your audience, or either your existing audience, or you have some way to activate a recurring audience to share content. And this model works better in some industries than others. It works really well in tourism, where you can get visitors to share photos, whether it's a famous selfie location or it's a hashtag around a certain region of the country, or other things. You can really build a base of great user-generated content, which can flow through to your website. We can talk about that on the next slide. If you have a photogenic product, we've worked with a number of photogenic products like camping, really nice camping tents. We've worked with several different companies to make different varieties of outdoor gear. And you can usually activate your own customers to do photos of them using it through different giveaways or bonus programs, loyalty programs. Things like that can generate user-generated content. Products and services that help people or provide wellness, that can usually generate success stories or people's progress, reporting on their progress with the product or service, as long as it's not a personal health thing that maybe people will be uncomfortable sharing about. But if it's like, this works really well in weight loss and fitness, and different categories like that. And then of course, events and entertainment, there's usually some sort of social activity happening. Of course, that's been disrupted a lot in the last year, but as those things return, might be a good time to initiate a user-generated content strategy or dust off one you've done before and make sure it's strong. And then DIY, when you're teaching people or giving people the tools to do things on their own, then they're gonna, generate stuff they can take pictures of and share. So those are the best categories. This is not the only categories that it works for, but in my opinion, it's the ones where it's going to make a lot of sense and almost, really be a core part of your content strategy to generate buzz and engagement, but also can help you generate imagery to use on your own social media or in your own content as well. And then how do you activate this? So one way to activate it is to establish a hashtag. So a lot of selfie photo locations will have a hashtag off to the side where people can see that if they take a picture there's a way they can share it, or that will show up where other people have done the same thing, and they can also check that and sort of look at their content compared to what other people have done. With hashtags, you can then hashtags are just one way, but you can also create an on-site photo stream where you can say, I want to show all the photos or all the content with a certain hashtag from Instagram or Twitter or other channels. You can pull that into your website so that it's an automatically updating part of your site. This is really popular for tourism, and we've seen it. We've actually worked on it for a few clients, and there are tools that allow you to moderate. So you can, in the back end of the site, you can see all the content with a certain hashtag, and you can check approval on ones you want to appear or ones you want to be featured. And there's a way to escalate certain ones to the top or something like that. There are tools and plugins on all major content management systems that allow for that type of integration. Another way is to activate essay contests, user stories. These are usually solicited from your audience through an email marketing campaign, and are often, there's often a giveaway or some sort of major promotion associated with that. People entering to win something from a drawing, or it's more complicated, but you can do where you score the essays, you score the stories, and give the best one or most creative one something special. Those are harder to do because of legal requirements of fairness, but we have been involved with some in the past that have been pretty successful. And then something that's easier to do is photo contests. Those work well for a variety of different categories, but tourism, culinary, and a variety of others. Photo contests are a good way to activate user-generated content. So I want to share this a lot. I think this is the last one I have on my list, but Sarah went into some ideas of how to use analytics to gather content ideas. I want to talk a little about how to track the success. So in my experience, one of the easiest ways to spot check if your content marketing is working is if you consistently use the main keyword or the main topic in the URL or the web address of the pages that you add. So as you add more pages about a certain topic, your site has more pages that have that word or that topic in the URL. And if you go to the Google Analytics behavior site content section, you can filter it by typing in a word. So you can type in one of your themes and look at a certain range of dates, and it'll show you if your traffic is increasing on pages that have that word in it. And that helps you understand the compounding impact without nitpicking whether a specific piece is doing well. As long as your overall traffic is going up on that topic, your content marketing is working. You can obviously, track it more granularly with goals and or specific pieces of content. But if you want something you can just check really quick anytime, that's the way to do it. And you can put the keywords in, as long as you have your main keyword in the title of the piece of content, and your titles are part of your URL, are the end of your URL, which is pretty standard practice for blogging and online content marketing. It's best practice for SEO as well. They don't have to match exactly, but as long as that main keyword is preserved, then you can search on that word. Or you can have URLs that have the category of the content in the URL. So all the content that's about, let's say, camping has camping, like /camping / in the slug, and then the name of the article. So you don't have to have camping on the name of the article necessarily to associate with that section of the site. And therefore you can search by that word, and all the content in that section would show up together, and your traffic would be cumulative. So this example is from one of our clients. They're a nonprofit out of New York, and prior to working with us, they had very little content about climate, but they wanted to focus on it. It was one of the, when we did a 2-month research project for them, we identified about 15 topics. Climate finance was one. So we wrote the outline. We wrote an outline for them. They wrote the content. Then we edited it. So it was a sort of collaboration on this strategy that I talked about at the beginning. But ultimately, they launched this new page, and on Earth Day of last year, they launched it with an email marketing campaign, which drove a lot of traffic because it was promoted, kind of an isolated promotion for it. But that had a short life cycle, and then it went back down to a level where people were finding it somewhat internally on their site. And then over time, it improved in the search engines. And now, this is sort of, it peaked in the late fall of how much new traffic they were getting. But it's about 4 times as much as they were getting before on that one topic. It's still not big numbers, but if they kept writing more content about climate, this would continue to stack up over time. It would grow. Each time they add a new piece, it might grow a little bit more. And it might also help the original piece do better. This one piece of content that they wrote was about 3,000 words. Ended up on the bottom of the first page of Google for climate finance. Now, if they were at the top of the first page, I know for a fact that they would be getting 2 or 3 times as much traffic as they are at the bottom of the first page. So they need to do additional content, additional strategies to build that up further. So that's my section. I guess we have a little time for Q&A now.
Yeah, and actually, Justin, we have some questions that people are asking while you were sharing that information. Thanks so much.
Yeah,
the first one, which I think I know I have a pretty short answer to this one, but Stephanie was asking, do you think giveaways are worth it in your experience?
Well, some of my best case studies are giveaways, but they weren't just small giveaways. Best case study of my entire career was for 3 years in a row, we gave away the main product of one of my clients, actually my father's company. The main product is a 7 to 11 day long holistic cruise. So it's worth $2,000 per person. We gave away 2 tickets. We also bundled that with private classes, private workouts with some influencers. So it's a vegan wellness event. So some vegan influencers, private workouts, private cooking classes on board, and some different books, signed books, and virtual classes from some of the influencers who were promoting that. Plus, I had 5 or 6 major influencers who shared it all at the same time for a month, over the course of a month. So they did 2 or 3 social media promotions, email promotions, we did Facebook ads. And each time we did it, we did 3 years in a row, and each year we did better. We got 10,000 entries the first year, 15,000 the second year, and 22,000 the third year, for a total of over 40,000 entries. And their email list went from 12,000 to 50,000 during that time period. And it took them about 10 years to get to 12,000. It took them 3 years to get from 10,000 to 50,000. And with 50,000 email addresses, they were able to sell their event out in 6 weeks every year after that, because they only had 2,000 tickets to sell to fill up the boat the half of the boat that they're responsible for filling up for the cruise. And that makes the whole marketing easier. That meant that they didn't have to do as many magazine ads or as many Facebook ads. It didn't cost very much to run that, because I mean, we just paid a little bit of social ads and coordinated some promotions with partners, and otherwise it's basically free. I mean, they had to pay for the rooms, which were at half of the face value, and all of their prizes were donated.
All right, so I have a few more questions from Sophia in the chat, and then we're going to move to the Q&A. I know some of you have had to leave, so thank you so much for joining us, but we will stay for a few more minutes and try to move through these as quickly as possible. So Justin, Sophia was asking, how can you approach UGC, which you were talking about earlier, when trying to make it look more organic as opposed to staged? I don't know if that question makes sense or if you need more information.
If you want to look more organic, there has to be some momentum around a hashtag, or it has to be in public view, like the selfie hashtags example. Like around North Asheville, there's a handful of popular selfie locations. There's a really popular one out in Bryson City by the train station, with the old train car on the side of the road. It's designed intentionally for that. They want people to associate Bryson City with the train, so they have a crane car you can take a picture with a hashtag right on the front of it, so you can see it even if you don't put it in your hashtag. It'll still be in the picture. So that may not feel authentic and original to some people, but to me, that it's easy and repeatable and doesn't take ongoing promotion, which makes it feel more authentic and more hands-off. You can also establish a hashtag for UGC easily around a location. So that can be on a menu in a restaurant. It can be on your menu board in a restaurant. It can, or other type of businesses that has retail locations can do the same thing and make it visible, but not push it on people. And then the same thing can be done for like a town or a county or a city or a region. We run multiple like that, where it just people got like regional photographers have gotten used to just always using it if they want to share the content with that group. And we just purchased an Instagram account last year called Blue Ridge Moments. It now has 140,000 people and over 200,000 user-generated submissions from over 1,000 photographers. So yeah, I mean, that we didn't establish that. We purchased that account from a friend of the family, but because we wanted to be able to leverage it for Romantic Asheville, to drive traffic for engagement for Romantic Asheville.
And then Sophia's second question was, overall, do you have any suggestions on strategies or tools that might have worked or been popular last year, but wouldn't be popular or work in 2021? It's funny, I was going to say, Sophia, that for me, I don't really have any specific tools that I think won't work in the coming year. I think all the tools still have some validity depending on, who you're trying to reach and what, really you want to accomplish, what your goals are. I do think one thing that we have to think about going forward into 2021 is really remembering that we're talking to people on the other end of a line, no matter what channel we're on, and really thinking about where they're coming from. I think there's a very high emotional component to marketing these days. I think the election created a lot of intense energy for people. And I just think that's something going forward that maybe we weren't thinking about as much last year. But now that we're at the end of 2020, I'm really telling everybody, really think about how people are feeling on the other end of the line of whatever channel you're using, especially when you're thinking about regions, because it might be different in different regions, right? So how people are feeling in, Georgia versus how people are feeling in New York, versus how people are feeling in, South Dakota. It's all very different. So I think that's just one thing I'd suggest. Justin, is there anything you're telling people not to do going forward?
No, not necessarily. I mean, I think that there are some specific content examples, topics or content examples that were very relevant for COVID-19, the way things were changing, pivots that were happening in businesses, which obviously, may be not as relevant anymore. There may be a whole nother set of things that have to be communicated this year about, transitioning back to a more hopefully a more normal way of living and way of traveling. And that'll happen gradually. And so that's a whole nother, one of the things I know is going to be true is that strategies are going to have to be evolving rapidly and on the fly, which they did last year too. So hopefully people are a little bit used to that. But I expect to see more of that this year, throughout the year, and hopefully 2022, all things go according to a lot of the plans that are out there. That we can have more of the long-term planning approach to next year. But this year it's going to just be a lot of things on the fly. So that, I mean, I think that really comes back to some of the strategies you were saying of like not looking too far out, having a short-term plan, using the efficiency tools to execute it so you don't end up missing opportunities. I mean, I do think we may have missed a few opportunities last year to launch new programs just because we didn't have the bandwidth to do them quickly.
Yeah.
And that was just the nature of what was happening with our business, but not just the business we have together, but other businesses that I'm involved with too.
As I say, we've got some stuff in the Q&A that I wanted to just really quickly touch on. Thanks, Sophia. I'm glad that was helpful. I didn't mean to cut you off, Justin. Sorry about that.
I was just going to say that unfortunately I have to run. I have a 3-hour planning meeting with the leadership team starting. I pushed it back a little bit to make sure we had the full hour, or the full 50 minutes. But
all right, no problem. Well, I can stay and answer some of these questions. Thank you so much. I wanted to address this first question. How do you find a legitimate influencer and not someone who just wants a free product? So that's a great question. I think the short answer is you really need to do kind of your research around your different influencers. So a lot of people are looking for shortcuts. How can I just find a list of influencers? And I would say that, Justin, who's done a lot of work with influencers, especially on the cruise that he mentioned, it's that he put a lot of time into real relationship building with those people. So not only did he follow their accounts and have meetings with them and really understand, how those people were operating, like what their values were, what their goals were, what they wanted to accomplish. He spent a lot of time on that, like probably a solid year, really figuring out who the top 5 people were in that particular project that he wanted to utilize. So I think it's about taking the time and not trying to rush it, to really pay attention. Look at how many followers they have, but look at what the engagement rates are. So I would rather get an influencer that has a smaller pool of followers that actually has engagement, right? So they're getting like a decent percentage of people to comment, to, respond to things, to basically participate in whatever kind of community they're building around themselves. So that's, just some quick things that I think you can really think about is, is the quality of their audience really worthwhile? And like I said, is what they represent really aligning with the brand entirely? And then are they willing to actually participate in the relationship building, right? And actually have conversations with you and talk to you. Justin certainly has had, different types of relationships with different influencers based on how communicative they were, how willing they were to meet, and to make plans together. And, he ended up identifying the people that were most committed. Justin also, I know a number of times has chosen to go after influencers that weren't the most popular. They were people who were kind of rising stars in an industry or around a topic. So sometimes going after the people that are, not already at the top, but there are people that are actually, you can see they're putting in the effort, right? They're posting regularly. Like I said, they're getting engagement. That can be helpful to think about too. Even micro influencers now are, pretty positive because a lot of them have smaller fan bases, but higher levels of engagement. Amelia, I see your question. You're curious if we've used animation or motion graphics and seen a positive response or an uptick in traction. If so, were there any specific audiences or places that worked best, like Facebook, Instagram, or website? I will say I have used animation and motion graphics numerous times over the years. I would say because I work personally with a lot of smaller businesses, they don't always invest in that type of stuff, right? They end up investing in video that kind of features their owner, founder, their locations and things like that. But when I have used animation and motion graphics, I think it's funny. There's 2 things that I think affect the effectiveness, right? Whether or not you get a positive response or an uptick in traction. One is, is your audience really people that are going to respond to it? So in some industries, people are more likely respond to animations or motion graphics than you do others. And hey, Susanna, just so you know, I see your question in the chat. I didn't answer that. I wrote it down in the Q&A, so I'm not sure if you can see that, but I will definitely, I'll talk about that in just a moment. But essentially, you know, whether or not the audience wants it is, I think, a key thing, just because industries are different. I can see Amber talking about how animation and illustration added to the site, it really reinforced the branding, and it really helped them get an uptick in a younger audience. So thank you for sharing that, Amber, from Biblio. I think that's a really good example, right? So Biblio is they sell books online and do a number of other things. And essentially, you know, I think the animation and the graphics, it made things easier to communicate, right? Because we can receive visuals more quickly than we do words. And so you're able to garner a number of people that maybe won't read a longer post or a longer message in an email, but they will click that play button. And I think that relates to the uptick in the younger market, that we see younger people more quickly and easily will digest the visuals and things like that. So I think the audience question is important. The second thing that I think matters is that you hire the right team to create them, and that, as Amber mentioned, that it's really branded to you, that it's something that you feel good about. If it's animated or illustrated, you just want to make sure that the people who create those things really understood the brand and your existing image and style, because you want that to come through. A lot of times when you get motion graphics or animations done sort of on the fly for cheap, those people don't spend as much of the time digging into who your business is, who your organization is, and, you know, really like creating an animation that reflects the brand. So that's where you want to spend the time and the money on that if you can, because I feel like you want that animation, that illustration, especially if it goes on your website, for it to really reflect, you know, the core of who the business or organization is. And then I think they can work anywhere. So social media, websites, blogs, animations and illustrations can be valuable in any channel that you have, just like video, I think, is valuable on any channel you have. If you're going to use it on social media, you have to make sure you're creating an animation or an illustration at the right length, depending on where you expect it to be placed. So for social media, just think about that. And then, yeah, thank you so much, Jenna, for pasting in that information that I wrote about the internships. That I just could answer while Justin was talking, so I wanted to share it. But I will share with everybody else, too, the question of how do you find good interns, which I mentioned in the chat. As Justin was sharing how you look at the team and figure out who's got what strengths and weaknesses, I was saying I think that process allows you, if you want to get an intern to help you with things, that process allows you to have an easier time finding the right person. So the basic principle that we found works is whatever your local universities and colleges are, go to wherever they have student career services. So don't expect professors and other parts of the college to have much to do with internships. There's usually a department dedicated to that. It's where the students go to get access to the internships for which they can get school credit. And you need to make sure that you can meet all of the school, the university or college requirements that they have. I will say internships have become more flexible, in my opinion, since the COVID situation occurred. So people can work more remotely now, which is awesome in some cases. But of course, there's lots of things to think about if you're still going to bring an intern into your space. I also think you want to make sure you write out a really clear job description of what that intern is going to do and what type of skills you would like them to have. Different interns at different stages of their education can be a big difference, right? Some of them have been in the workforce before, some of them haven't. So that's just something really to outline clearly, as if you were going to hire somebody for your company, treat it the same way. And then to that, end, make sure you do interviews, interview multiple interns, make them go through that process, and then hire the person that you want to hire. Even if these people are going to work for free and get college credit, to me, you really want to let them go through the process. of actually interviewing, getting hired, and then having the job clearly outlined what they're going to be doing on a weekly basis, how many hours is going to be involved. So I know I'd already typed that out for you, Susanna, but that's just, I think, an overview for everybody else. If you're looking at interns like I am this year, that's a really important part of the process, is to really know what you're asking for. You might not be able to get a student that has every skill that you dream of, but if you're really clear about what you want and what you need support in, that's the part where, like Justin said, figure out where you need to fill the gaps. Then write a job description that helps fill those gaps, and see if you can find somebody who might have almost all of those skills, or at least some of them. The great thing about student interns is a lot of times they're really interested in learning. They're excited. And so they can be trained to do different things pretty easily, as long as they have some of the core things that you need to fill those gaps that Justin talked about. So again, thank you all for staying a little bit longer. If there's any other questions, pop them in the chat or the Q&A if you would like. But I can see more than half everybody had to get back to work. So again, thank you for your grace as we start the year with technical difficulties. I super appreciate it. But I hope that we will see you all again in February. February and March, we're going to have some really exciting digital drop-ins. Justin will be bringing in some great guests to talk about some higher level marketing things. Especially in March, we'll have Rand Fishkin from SparkToro and Moz. So thank you all again. Happy New Year, and I look forward to seeing you soon.